They say if you stand inside the old stone dungeons of Fort Santiago at night, you can still hear them. Voices, scratching at the walls, water that isn't there. People who work in Intramuros, the old walled heart of Manila, will tell you about the cold spots, the footsteps in empty corridors, the figures at the edge of the cobblestones, gone the moment you look. Manila gets called the most haunted city in Asia, and the stories are everywhere. Soldiers, prisoners, a woman in white, children crying in buildings where no children should be. But here's the thing nobody tells you. Every single one of those ghost stories is sitting on top of something real, something that actually happened. And the real story is so much worse than any legend. So let's talk about what actually happened here. Because once you know, you'll never look at this city the same way again. First, you need to understand what Manila used to be. Before the war, people called it the Pearl of the Orient. Wide boulevards, Spanish architecture, churches that had stood for centuries. One of the most beautiful cities in Asia, full of people, full of life, around 1 million of them. And then, in February 1945, in the span of a single month, most of it was gone. Here's the setup. World War II is ending. The Japanese forces occupying Manila know the Americans are coming to take the city back. The smart military move is to declare it an open city. Leave. Spare the civilians. But the commander defending Manila refused to leave. So American troops pushed in from the outside, using heavy artillery to blast the Japanese out of building after building. And the Japanese forces, trapped inside and facing certain death, turned on the one group of people who had nowhere to run, the civilians. What happened next is now called the Manila Massacre, and I'm going to be careful here because these were real people, but you need to understand the scale. Over that 1 month, at least 100,000 civilians died, 1 in every 10 people in the city. Some estimates go far higher. They were killed in their homes, in hospitals, in schools, in churches, where they'd gone to hide, believing, like people always have, that a church was the one place that would be safe. It wasn't. At one college, around 2,000 people sheltering inside were killed. At another, hundreds more. And the American artillery, meant to save lives, leveled entire city blocks with civilians still inside. By the end, historians compared Manila to Warsaw and Stalingrad, cities that had become symbols of total destruction. 70% of the homes, the factories, the entire business district, gone. And now, we get to Fort Santiago. This is the place the ghost stories love most. A 400-year-old stone fortress on the edge of the Pasig River. And there's a legend, maybe you've heard it, that the Japanese would pack prisoners into the dungeons below, then open the gates and let the river flood in at high tide, drowning them slowly in the dark. It's a terrifying story. And here's the twist this channel was built for. It probably isn't true. Historians and archaeologists found that the dungeons sit above the waterline. The river couldn't have flooded them, so the legend is a myth. But here's why I said the real story is worse. Because when American forces finally took the fort, they didn't find a flood. They found around 600 bodies, decomposing, piled on top of each other, in chambers too small to even sit down in. They hadn't drowned. They had suffocated, packed so tightly, in the dark, that they simply ran out of air. The legend invented a flood, because the truth, slow suffocation in a sealed stone box, was somehow too much to say out loud. The myth was the gentler version. So let me ask you the question this whole video has been building toward. Are the ghosts real? Honestly, it depends on what you mean by a ghost. Because here's what I think is really going on. A city doesn't forget something like this. The stories, the cold spots, the voices, the woman in white, they're not really about the supernatural. They're a city's memory, trying to make sense of a wound that big. When 100,000 people die in 1 month, in your churches, in your schools, in your homes, The grief has to go somewhere. The ghost stories are the memory. They're how a place remembers the people who were never properly mourned. So no, you don't need to believe in spirits to feel something when you stand in Fort Santiago. You just need to know what happened there. And now you do. That's the thing about Manila. It isn't haunted by ghosts. It's haunted by the truth. If this gave you chills, the good kind and the heavy kind, subscribe, because we go to the places history class skipped. And tell me down in the comments, what's a piece of dark history from your part of the world that almost nobody knows about? I read every one. Stay curious. I'll see you in the next one.